we actually came across a community that had never seen a white person before. And that alone was like...
mind-blowing to them.
And this is why it was so good that I had someone there to help translate. Otherwise, I would have bypassed that community and I wouldn't have this story now. But with the guide called Me, always got confusing, me and me, we're down south.
Yeah.
And with him being there, he was able to talk and tell me that's the first time. I was like, what about the older people? He was like, you would ask them, they're back to me, yeah, this is the first time seeing a white person.
Whoa.
What language do they speak there?
Malagasy. So it's kind of a mix. French is the second language.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like a mix between French and their own, which is not like Malagasy.
And so from there you moved, made your way further up.
Further north. And just to give you a bit of context as to what Madagascar was like in terms of the dangers that I really didn't sort of anticipate. So it was the bandits, it was the gunpoint, it was the dehydration of being down south. There's kind of like wells on the beach, which is slightly filtered salt water. There's a lot of malnutrition, a lot of poverty down south of Madagascar. I was bitten by spiders, leeches in the jungle. I'd have to take my shirt off in the tent and pull off a good 6-7 leeches per night, flick them out the jungle, out the tent. The spider bites became infected. We had to then cross crocodile infested rivers a lot of the time. And only a month in, I then contracted the deadliest strain of malaria as well. And that was due to me coming across a community that still suffered with the bubonic plague, such an ancient disease, which I was warned about. And we were kind of desperate for food and water. And they said, look, you can stay here, but you stay in your tent. There's the bubonic plague here. We'll bring the food to you. Stay away from the animals, which have the fleas.
And
then.
How is that transmitted?
Via the flea bites.
Right, okay, so flea bites there.
So they were kind of like stay, because they had like dogs there and rats. They were kind of like stay in your tent because they had a few members unfortunately pass only like days before. So we felt out of place. We were like, look, we should just get food and water and bounce.
Yeah.
But my guide, Me, was like, no, it's fine. Like, we can stay here. I was like, okay, I'll just listen to him. So we stayed there. They passed the food through the tent, through the zipper. And it was eel and rice. And this eel smelt a little bit funky, but we were starving. So we wolfed it down. Had to go for it. And the next few days we were both suffering with diarrhea and we were vomiting. So we had slight food poisoning, which meant that the anti-malaria pills, because I was taking anti-malaria pills, they cover you about 80%. They were going in one way, out the other, didn't have the full dose protecting me. And you've got 4 different strains of malaria. You've got the 3 lower ones, which if you get, they're not as deadly, but they can remain dormant in your system forever. Like poke their ugly head once a year, twice a year. Whereas you've got falciparum, that's the deadliest, and it usually kills you within 24 hours. So I'm there hiking in what must have been about 35 degrees Celsius at this point, managing to still do a marathon a day because the daylight hours provided us to continue with malaria, but I didn't know.
That's what I was going to say. You would have just assumed it was food poisoning, right?
Food poisoning or dehydration, because it was so similar to what I'd faced in the Gobi Desert, but it didn't make sense because I was like, no, I've been drinking, I've been taking my salts and my sugars. What is this?
Yeah.
And like the energy just went. I just went from being like strong and capable to like not even being able to throw on my rucksack, which at this point was 35 kilograms. It felt like 100 kilograms, because I felt so much weaker now. But I just put it down to, you're right. Like maybe still the food poisoning, dehydration.
So and how long into this journey? How many?
This was 1 month into the 5-month journey.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, pretty early on still.
Yeah. And you've come more prepared in terms of first aid this time. Like you've got the tablets. I imagine you got them before the trip started.
Yeah.
As a, this could happen. It's very likely we'll get malaria out there. Let's go prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I felt very prepared. And with this one, we had insurance, which was good, but there was no way necessarily to get picked up from where we were. We had to push on. And I knew that there was a community with overland transport, that if I can make it to that community, I can get sort of evacuated to the nearest city overland. And I did. And I remember by the time I had arrived at the hotel, because they said they want me to be quarantined. And so they said, go straight to the hotel, don't come to the hospital. The doctor will meet me there. And I just remember collapsing on the bed at this point. This is fast forward in about 5-6 days now that I had been suffering with malaria, just not knowing it was malaria, collapsed on the bed. There was 3 doctors, sort of their heads spinning. I remember them trying to sit me up. They took my blood. They came back what felt like minutes later, and she just kept saying that you've got falciparum. You've got falciparum. Broken English.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what the fuck falciparum was. I wasn't so educated with malaria as a whole, to be honest. And I was like, what's falciparum? And she kept saying like hours and you'll be dead, or hours and like you died. And I just didn't get what she meant at all. So I was now panicking, thinking, is she saying that I might die in a few hours? What's she saying? Because it felt like I was going to die in a few hours. And then it was translated that I've got the deadliest strain. If I had have arrived any later, the doctor believes 2-3 hours longer, I would have slipped into a coma and potentially died. But now that I've arrived here, I just have to do as she says, take the pills, and she can eradicate it fully out of my system. Whilst the other 3 remain dormant, with the deadliest, you can eradicate it out of your system. So that's the pros and the cons, you know.
Right.
The con is it can kill you within a day. The pro is
if you do survive it, you survive it.
You survive it.
How long were you there? How long were you out with this malaria then?
In the hotel.
Yeah.
It took me again about a week to recover.
Yep.
7-8 days, and within that week now I had lost 13 kilograms. So I was training hard before Madagascar, put on a lot more muscle mass, and it
was gone like that.
And I still had 4 months left of the highest mountains and the densest jungles ahead of me.
Wow. A lot of people definitely would have just sacked it at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you get malaria. Yeah. Oh my God.
And so with the malaria, that's through the flies,
that's the mosquitoes with
the mosquitoes. Sorry, and then so the dodgy eel that you had.
Yeah.
Was that just like a food poisoning?
Yeah, that was
situation.
That was the food poisoning, and because of that, the anti-malaria pills that I was taking just kept bringing them up.
So that made your body a lot more susceptible to the malaria because your protection wasn't necessarily
exactly,
right.
But also allowed me to survive the 5 days. So whilst it usually kills you within a day, because I still had some form of the anti-malaria fighting it, that's the only reason that I was able to survive 5 days.
So you think without that anti-malaria pill, you would have died in that 24 hours for sure?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were taking those pills every day?
Every
just
day.
Like a one pill a day?
Yeah.
Thing?
Okay. There definitely was after that bout with malaria. Any mosquito that came around me, so paranoid.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Paranoid after that.
And did you have any sort of like long-lasting effects from that?
I didn't. No,
yeah.
I didn't. Maybe that's because I was so young. Like, I was 23, had my birthday out there, 23, 24. And so maybe the youth, I just sort of, but I've always trained very physically hard and always looked after my body nutritionally as well.
Yeah.
And so I really sort of gave it a fighting chance, because everything that I anticipate could happen in Mongolia and Madagascar, it's in my mind that it might happen, and I start visualizing what that will feel like. So I try to mitigate all the risks and try to, there's a lot of attention to detail with the expeditions. In the earlier days, there wasn't. It was like fucking reckless.
But now you want illegal.
Crossing borders from India, Pakistan, being told that I need to buy a permit, and me being like, fuck off, I'm not buying a permit. It was like, well, if you ignore us, like if you are caught by the Pakistan military, go on your knees, put your thumbs behind your ears and repeat, I think it was Allah Akbar, which is kind of like, God have mercy on me. And like, that should have stopped me. That would probably stop me now.
Yeah.
But back then it didn't. It was just lots of reckless stuff. But with Mongolia, that's when I had to nip all of that recklessness, because it wasn't a case of winning or losing. It was genuinely a case of living or dying.
Yeah.
And so I did anticipate all of the things that happened in Madagascar, even running from bushfires. All of this I knew was a possibility. And I think that's also why when I was suffering with malaria, my family and friends were like, you need to come home. This isn't a flu. This isn't a cold. Yeah. You've got the biggest killer in human history in the form of a disease. You need to get home. I knew, one, that I was in safe hands, because unfortunately they deal with malaria cases all the time.
Yeah.
And two, it didn't approach as shock of capture. It didn't send me into that whole fight or flight. It was one of those, I'm devastated, I'm gutted, but now that I know that I can remove it out of my system, I can push on, because there's now no excuses. I anticipated it,
Yeah.
How many people does malaria kill a year? Do you know what that is?
It changes all the time, but it would be good to know what it was for like last year.
I'm curious, because something like that this has been around for for so long. I'm almost surprised that there just hasn't been, you know, like you said, you're taking the prevention medicine.
Yes.
So there is a way to prevent it. But why hasn't that been done at a higher scale? I mean,
630k in 2020.
There you go. So see this organization here, Malaria No More UK, I became ambassador for.
Okay, amazing.
After catching malaria. And
so is that like a prerequisite to becoming an ambassador for it?
You
gotta get it first, otherwise you're not allowed. Sorry.
Yeah, but the beauty about that, what's better about the world record as a whole with Madagascar is after catching malaria and returning home and becoming ambassador, I was able to address the UK government in Parliament alongside Annie Lennox from Eurythmics. And do you know that? Do you know, like, go do.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
And so she's got her own story surrounding malaria. I had mine. And as a joint effort, we were trying to get an increase from the UK government into the global fund. And if successful, that 20% would lead to £1.2 billion, which would go to help save 8 million lives and cases of malaria within the next 5 years. And as a joint team, we were all successful.
Wow!
So just that alone is better than any sort of record. You know, would I take it again just to be a voice for those people who don't have a voice? You know, to get anti-malaria pills, it's the same price as a cup of coffee. But in Madagascar, they can't afford a cup of coffee, so they lose their life over it.